Now move on to the main agenda. The minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of March 2015 have been laid on the table for half an hour. Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. I'll sign them in due course. Apologies for absence, please. Can't be any.
None received, Leader.
No, everyone's here. Any declarations of interest, please?
None received in advance.
Thank you very much. Questions from members of the public? Mr. Patrick Haveron.
It is both Government and Conservative Party policy that local authorities determine their own housing targets. Could the leader and the portfolio holder for planning explain who in government keeps writing to Waverley with increased housing numbers?
Councillor Adams.
Thank you again for another question, Mr. Haveron, and it's nice to know you're taking so much interest in the portfolio. The Department of Communities and Local Government, guided by the Office of National Statistics, regularly publish updates to the projections for household and population growth by borough. Each time this is done, councils are required by the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF, to consider their ability to meet this alleged need. Calculations translate these figures into housing numbers and distribution. A failure to achieve these numbers can lead to an inspector finding the local plan unsound. The decision, therefore, is basically made by the inspector. However, when the government says local authorities determine their own needs, it is referring to the landscape, environmental and sustainability issues clarified in the NPPF and NPPG, which can act as a constraint on the potential land available for building, and consequently the housing number deliverable is reduced. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beeman.
I'm quite happy for the question to be taken as read.
Thank you very much. Councillor Potts will answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beeman, for your question. I'm sorry, but you appear to have got the wrong end of the stick. Waverley has been extremely prudent in its use of the new homes bonus, and I'll explain why. Firstly, let me be crystal clear in that Waverley's never made a secret of the new homes bonus. In fact, it's a key feature of our published financial strategy. However, the reason that it is not mentioned in the council tax leaflet is because, unlike many other councils, Waverley do not use it simply to balance its books. Given that the new homes bonus is in fact a short-term funding measure with a very uncertain future, I think you'll agree that it's a very prudent approach by us. Now, Waverley's policy is to use the new homes bonus to invest in new and improved services and facilities for our residents, and we try to ensure that we either reduce running costs or we increase our income. For example, the leisure centre refurbishments and improvements to the recycling service are two recent examples. Indeed, the return on our investment using new homes bonus at our leisure centres equates to some 4.5%, far in excess of what we could actually earn in the bank. This policy helps us to balance our budget in the long term, which, obviously, in the light of major cuts to our revenue support grant, I'm sure you will agree is good news for our council taxpayers. Now, finally, to take the last part of your question, you've actually questioned the percentage reduction, and I can confirm that Waverley's revenue support grant, excluding the 2014-15 council tax freeze grant, which the government includes in the total figure, has reduced by £619,000 in 2015-16, which is a 30% reduction compared to the previous year. So I hope that helps to answer your question. Thank you, Mr. Beeman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hyman.
Thank you. Thank you, Lena. The word we hear from the City is that the funding offer for CNS's Brightwell scheme is substantially reduced from expected, perhaps only half that necessary, due to the scheme's mix or balance being commercially unviable without public subsidy, and hence there's concern that to proceed would present a major risk to both council taxpayers and to Farnham's environment, as the council would in effect be requiring that Crest brings forward a major redesign and balancing of the scheme post-commencement. And in such situations, a safeguard exists in the public's ability to resort to the courts on EIA and habitats grounds, of course, and also in the legal requirement that the land cannot be disposed of for less than best consideration, unless referred to the Secretary of State. But unfortunately, the conditional contract appears to allow for financial viability conditions to be waived, and it's possible that the Council would consider the matter of best consideration in exempt session, such that the public you serve may be deprived of the benefit of the transparency necessary to ensure probity and legal compliance in relation to the land value. And so in view of these concerns and the expectation of transparency in major public projects, will the Council please assure us that were it to decide to risk proceeding, and if it makes Crest's contract unconditional in order to allow Crest to commence demolition and development at Brightwells, then the terms and financial figures agreed in the contract, and in particular the land value decided upon, will be made public immediately following such a decision? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyman. I can assure you that Waverley will follow due process and meet statutory requirements relating to the publication of information supporting a key decision, having regard for commercial sensitivity and the need to protect Waverley's contractual position. Financial and contractual information will be available once the contract with the developer is unconditional. Achieving best consideration is not an option. It is a legal requirement, so Waverley will undertake all the necessary due diligence that is necessary to support a decision of this importance. Item 5 is Executive Forward Programme, April 2015. Any amendments? Is that agreed? Agreed. Station Road Budget Approval. Councillor Stinnett.
Thank you, Leader. As the Executive will be aware, the development of 14 affordable homes at Station Road is progressing more slowly than hoped because of the site is located on an unknown 9th century burial ground, for which no previous records had existed. In March last year, excavation work started in the area on the site that will be occupied by residential buildings. 85 skeletons were removed. The Council has taken a pragmatic, staged approach and taken on board the advice from the Council's employers, agents, and are going to deal sensitively with the bones in the immediate area of construction, while seeking to avoid unnecessary costs and time delays. It has now become clear that further excavation work is required to prevent the archaeological surroundings of the area of the site and the impact by construction vehicles on the work carried out around the site. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Any comments? One recommendation, is that agreed? Agreed. Item 7 is review of contract procedure rules and financial regulations. Councillor Potts.
Leader, thank you. Item 7 and the report is on pages 19 to 74. In summary, the contract and procedural rule and financial regulations were last updated in 2012, and they've therefore been reviewed in line with our commitment, which falls within the annual governance statement. The objective of this is basically to ensure that they reflect the current management reporting structure and will support service delivery, whilst obviously ensuring our governance arrangements remain secure in relation to both risk and statutory compliance. The proposal that you have before you, colleagues, was actually reviewed and scrutinised in depth by the Audit Committee on March the 23rd, and they had no further comments to report on this. Leader, there's therefore one recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, please? Therefore, the recommendation, I assume, starts halfway through, that we now, having considered the observations of the Audit Committee, we now recommend to Council that the revised financial regulations and contract procedure rules be adopted. So that is therefore now the recommendation. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Amendments to the scheme of delegation. Councillor Adams to start, I think.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the first item under this heading is neighbourhood plans. Currently, the designation of a neighbourhood planning area takes about 3 months, including a 6-week period of consultation. From the 9th of February this year, the period of consultation was reduced by the government to 4 weeks, and a time limit of 8 weeks set for designated areas that enclosed a single parish boundary. Those that don't have longer timescales. The proposal to delegate powers only relates to those requiring to meet the 8-week deadline. The next item is planning enforcement. That's item 2 on the 8.2. In respect of recommendation 2 in section 8, I would refer you to the short paragraphs 5 and 6 on page 76. Strategic environment assessments, which is item 3. Yep. In respect of recommendation 3 in section 8, 2 changes of wording are proposed. The first is described in para 8 on page 77 and the second in para 9. In both cases, the implicit delegation to the head of planning is made explicit. And I'll now hand over to my...
He's forgotten my name, it's King. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry. Item on page 77 covering housing operations on expenditure levels. Colleagues will probably be aware because it keeps on happening, but although the overall budget is approved by Council, there are a number of high-value property service budgets with no delegations under the Council scheme of delegation, which results in each spend on property needing to come to the Executive for individual approval. This extends the time in getting work on our houses underway and can result in poor customer service, rent loss and harm to the Council's reputation as a landlord. Delegated authority is already with the Head of Strategic Housing and Delivery to approve expenditure up to £30,000 under the Private Sector Home Improvement Policy, and authorising delegated authority for the Head of Housing Operations for specific major HRA works would align the delegated authority that is already in place for private sector spend. Naturally, if agreed, the internal processes will be reviewed to ensure that a formal appraisal is in place to consider costs in relation to the HRA business plan. And Appendix 1 shows the approximate number of instances per annum across the various housing operations sectors. And I commend recommendation 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, please? Item number 8, there are 4 recommendations. Are they agreed? Agreed. Item 9 is the Godalming Crown Pits Conservation Area Appraisal. Councillor Adams.
Yes, Crown Pits Conservation Area, Godalming. This item is a request to adopt the conservation area for the Crown Pits area of Godalming as a material consideration when an application for planning permission or listing building consent is requested. The appraisal followed the standard consultation process outlined on page 82, which took place between the 12th of December and the 15th of January this year. Comments on the consultation start on page 114. It identified that the current area covered by the conservation area remained appropriate. There is an outline of the area on page 92. A further map on page 98 indicates listed building and heritage features. These are in good condition. The main issues identified were heavy traffic on the Brighton Road and insufficient parking. The management plan starting on page 103 contains 7 recommendations. Leader, I propose the recommendation for item 9.
Thank you very much. Any comments, please? Item number 9, there is one recommendation. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Item 10, the domestic abuse policy. The paper on this is set out page 119 to 124. Following the death of the police officer Heather Cooper at Hazelmere, the Safer Waverley Partnership undertook its first domestic homicide review, and out of this came an overview report and action plan. One of the key recommendations was for all organisations, particularly in Surrey, to develop a robust domestic policy for their staff, and the Waverley policy is attached with the report. And I commend the recommendation to the executive. Any comments? Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Leader. As Chair of the Safer Waverley Partnership, I can't endorse this strongly enough, and I welcome this move by Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any others? Item 10, one recommendation. Is that agreed? Agreed. 11 is the Treasury Management Framework 2015-16. Councillor Potts.
Leader, thank you. This is basically a tidy up in actual fact, and colleagues may well remember this item coming before them on the 3rd of February. However, we are now advised that this particular recommendation requires ratification by full council, hence this evening's recommendation to executive to refer this and recommend it back to council. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. It's a tidying up issue, really. Any comments? One recommendation on item 11. Is that agreed? Agreed. Item 12 is the Oxford Ridge procurement route and pre-development budget. Councillor Stennett.
Thank you, Leader. The Oxford Ridge regeneration project to build 99 new homes and refurbish 80 existing homes continues to progress. Earlier this month, we were granted planning permission to build 2 show houses. We are currently tendering for this work and interviewed 2 shortlisted building contractors today. We hope that construction work will start in June, subject to budget approval, and will take 26 weeks to complete. For the main contract, which exceeds OJEU limits, we would like to procure a contractor through the existing framework agreement, as the AJEU processes the lengthily and using the framework which will reduce the lead time, offer the council greater flexibility, enable us to meet out our start on-site targets in September 2015. We would like to progress with the Homes and the Community Agency under the HCA framework, which offers 25 pre-qualified contractors. The report also seeks to increase the budget allocation for the pre-development costs so that we can appoint employers' agents to act on our behalf and the other consultants we need to take the project forward. I support the 2 recommendations set out in this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments, please? Item number 12, there are 2 recommendations. Are they agreed? Agreed. Council, item number 13 is the IT development team staffing SharePoint. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. I have to say, working in IT, I sometimes wonder if I ought to be training myself up to be SharePoint, because SharePoint experts are few and far between, and the council does use quite a lot of SharePoint technology, which is sort of, in essence, document sharing and collaboration, and very useful tools that they are too. This is basically a change in the way the IT team is set up with no overall cost to the council, and I commend the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, members. The costs are set out in exempt papers. Councillor Potts.
Yes, Leader, if I may, I fully endorse the recommendations. As Councillor Martin said, this is an extremely important recommendation before you this evening, and we really do need to ensure that our IT and our IT systems are robust and fit for purpose and for the forthcoming administrations, and therefore I fully endorse the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comment? Item 13, there are 2 recommendations. Are they agreed? Agreed. Item 14, the Executive Director's actions.
Thank you, Leader. No actions on this category this month. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There is one more item which is exempt. I don't know whether we can deal with it without going into exempt. It's a property matter on page 139, 144, as set out in those papers. If anybody wants to discuss it, then we'll move to exempt. Councillor Potts, do you want to say anything?
Colleagues, I'm assuming that you've read the report in exempt, starting on page 139, and I will also take it that, as we haven't had any questions from you, that you are happy with the recommendations and happy that we proceed with those.
Good, thank you. The two recommendations on page 141 then, they are agreed. Thank you very much. That brings us to an end this evening's meeting. Thank you.